The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
So I want to share with you a nerdic story that I heard from Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky about himself, a Mesiras Nefesh that he was asked to do by the Chazon Ish, together with a friend of his. The story will first start in his early, young teenage years, when the war, World War II, broke out, and he left the Yiddish Europe, and he ended up in Siberia. He was in a Russian camp. In a camp where obviously they weren't being killed there, but it wasn't an easy situation. And the commander of the camp had interesting mahalchim, how he dealt with his prisoners. If they were admonished, if they were punished, if they were sentenced to some kind of a knas. One of them was that if a certain behavior was deemed as wrong, they would not get food for 40 days. They would have to find their own way of getting food for themselves for 40 days. But this commander tried to show that he's not a terrible person. So when the 40 days ended, the next day, the 41st day, he would give them an extra plate of soup just to show that he's fair. 40 days is 40 days and not more. And the Yaakov Galinsky said he was one of those. He got punished, 40 days no food, and he had to find his whatever he found, and he had 40 days. His 40 days ended, the 41st day, he was given that extra plate of soup. There was someone else there, a Friar Yid, that had gotten punished one day after Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky. In other words, Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky's 41st day, the day that he got his extra plate of soup, was still the 40th day of this other person. This other person's name was Chaikel. And Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, being sitting in the area where they ate, saw Chaikel. And Chaikel Nebuch. So Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky told him, when no one's looking, I'll sneak you half of my plate, and you're desperate today, it's your 40th day, I'll give it to you. Fine, he didn't know him, but he knew that he was punished, so he helped him out. This is part one of the story. Eventually, Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky came to Eretz Yisrael, and he got in Shaykhis in the area of Bnei Brak, where the Chazon Ish was, obviously then. And one day, he gets a message from the Chazon Ish that he and another friend of his should please come to the Chazon Ish. Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky said that what's going to happen is that the Chazon Ish wanted them to do something. The Chazon Ish up to then never asked him for any shlichus. So it's very interesting that the Chazon Ish had other people that he asked for shlichus, and for this specific shlichus that we're going to discuss, he asked Rabbi Galinsky specifically. It was the first time. He came to Chazon Ish, and Chazon Ish told him as follows. At that time, there were the Yiddish communities that came from Sephardi countries, and when they arrived in Eretz Yisrael, Nebuch, they were subjected to be put in areas where they were forced to leave their heritage, to leave their Yiddishkeit. They would not be given food except if they gave up their tefillin. They would not be given clothing if they didn't give up their Shabbos. Their peisk had to be cut. And all these things they had to give up slowly, Nebuch. And Nebuch, how many? And the Chazon Ish tells them that there's now a camp area where there's a lot of families there with their children, and the Nebuch being subjected slowly to go away from the Yiddishkeit. and he wants him and his friend to go there and get petition signatures from the parents, from all these parents who are there, saying that they want their children to get a Yiddish chinuch, a Torah chinuch. And his goal, the Chazon Ish's goal, was that once he gets such a petition, he will give it over to Firma Askanim and put a certain pressure, hopefully, on the government to force the government to free them from this matzav. So this was far away. It was traveling in those days. It took maybe a day to get there. Yaakov Galinsky comes there with his friend, and they get to the location and they see it's totally fenced with barbed wire. You cannot get in. There's a gate that's totally locked. Now obviously they can't ask permission for such a petition because they wouldn't be allowed in. This place is a place against what the petition is supposed to be. So it would have to be done in a hidden dark way. But they couldn't, because it was locked, everything was closed. So what do you do? So they went back to the Chazon Ish. They traveled back a day again, back. And they told the Chazon Ish, we came there, and we see, there's a fence, we can't go in. In order for us to be able to sneak a petition, we have to be able to sneak in and out. And it's impossible. We can't get in. Chazon Ish told us, what's the problem? You can't get through, dig a trench under the fence and go in that way. Mesiras Nefesh. Dig a trench. They'll get arrested in a second. Walk illegally into a barbed wire, into a fenced area, trespassing. But Chazon Ish said they traveled, schlepped back, and it's exactly what they did. They dug the trench. And they dug the trench, and once they got in, Yaakov Galinsky said to their Schwarz, black mazel, he thought anyway, 50, 60 feet away, two people are walking. One of them seemed to be some kind of authoritative person within the camp. That's the presentation they presented, and he was walking with someone. And literally they're caught red-handed. But Chazon Ish said, and they're there. This person that Yaakov Galinsky understood to be a knacker in this camp, stops him and says, who are you? Right before he stopped him, Yaakov Galinsky heard the other person saying to this authoritative person in the camp, he was talking to him and said, Chaikel, what do you think about this and this and this and this and this and this? And Yaakov Galinsky said, Chaikel. It's an interesting name. Not so common. Chaikel. And his head is rushing. And he says, Chaikel, in the camp in Russia? Is it possible this is the Chaikel? So then when the person asks Yaakov Galinsky and his friend, who are you? What are you doing here? Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky's response was, Chaikel? From the camp in Russia? He says, how would you know? He says, Yaakov Galinsky. Yaakov Galinsky? You saved me! You gave me that half a plate of soup! What do you need? What are you here for? His heart melted. Nebuch, he had fallen so bad, that Chaikel, that he was the head of a camp that was taking Yidden away from Yiddishkeit. Yet, a nitzitz, a Warmkeit, Yiddishkeit came into him. When he confronted, met Yaakov Galinsky, that gave him and he melted. And he said, whatever you want, what do you need? Yaakov says, I need to get a petition from the parents signed. Go ahead, it's yours. And he went. They went around the camp. They got 80 parents signing. That's the amount, everyone. They got everyone to sign. 80 families were there. And they left. And they came back to the Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish gave that petition over. And there was siyata d'shmaya neiro. Despite the government's interest and ambition to take these people away from Yiddishkeit. Achmar al-Islam. Tishma them. The efforts were not fruitless. And they were let out of the camps. And the families ended up being from. The Chazon Ish asked them to do a davar that makes no sense in Teva. Makes no sense. You dig a trench, if someone sees you then, you're arrested on the spot. If you're not found then, and you end up in the camp, Shalei B'Shus, you're also taken away by the police. What was the Havam in it? Doesn't take a second, doesn't take 5 minutes to get petitions. But the Chazon Ish didn't make this cheshbonos. Rabbi Yaakov Yosef said, imagine, the Chazon Ish, B'ruach Kodshoy, called for me. He never ever before asked me to do a shlichus. Why did he choose me for this shlichus? He chose me because B'ruach Kodshoy, Yaakov Galinsky was the right person. Because Yaakov Galinsky had met Chaikel. A Ma'aser Neire. Mesiras Nefesh. This is Shevet Levi by the Egel.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org